people in as they come. And I believe we are live. All right. Welcome, everyone. Thanks for joining us today. This is Lunch Bites. We are September the 17th today, and we're going to be starting what is going to be a two-part series on scams and mental health. This is going to be we've got a pretty good set of information that we're going to share later in our second episode. It's where we're drawing a lot of information from today. But just before I kind of get into the introduction for everything, I just want to do our usual intro. So welcome. This is Lunch Bites. We are a podcast of the Hope Learning Center, which is a program of the Canadian Mental Health Association's Saskatchewan Division. We're situated here in Regina, Saskatchewan, which is Treaty 4 territory. So we always like to give our acknowledgement that this was and is traditional territory of the Cree, Saulteaux, Dakota, Lakota, Nakota, and homeland of the Métis. Just offer our respects to all of the ancestors that came before us, everyone that is still living on the land today, and of course, all of the generations that are still to come to enjoy our beautiful country and province. So for today, we are joined by Carmen Ledding, who is not just the program director for CMHA Rosetown, she is also one of the Hope Learning Center's facilitators. You've probably seen her in a bunch of different courses. She is going to be joining us today on our discussion around scams and mental health. Carmen, hi, welcome.
Hi, thank you for having me today, Dan. I'm so excited to be here.
Yeah, this has been one we've kind of been working on for a little while now, so it's kind of nice that we're at the final stage, the broadcast stage of the episode. Yeah, so like I said, for anyone out there listening, we're going to be talking, we've put together a rather comprehensive guide. We're just kind of putting the last final touches on kind of everything. We're going to make sure it is available for anyone both on our podcast. We're going to link it in our second episode. This is going to be the first one. And then we will also have a link up on our website to be able to download the resource as well. It's a big document. It's going to have a lot more information, obviously, on kind of scams, different types of scams, terminology, all sorts of good information. But for today, we're going to be drawing a bit of information off of that and just kind of formatting it into a little bit more, obviously, a consumable time bite for a half hour, 40 minutes, or wherever we land for today's conversation. So, Carmen, I just thought maybe to start off, just why did we decide that scams and mental health was kind of a topic that the Hope Learning Center should tackle, and kind of what was a little bit of the background information for today's episode?
Oh, thanks for asking. Well, we definitely here at Hope Learning Center and at CMHA, we work with people who are trying to empower themselves and learn about keeping themselves safe. And a common thing or a common theme that has come up, whether we are working with perhaps seniors groups or people who might be struggling with independence, people who might be struggling with different vulnerability factors. Definitely scams are becoming more commonplace. And so it's really hard to know, how do I differentiate between what is a scam and when is it something that is a really valid request? How can I protect myself, or how can I protect perhaps a relative or friend or a loved one that I know might be vulnerable to scams? So that's why we're so lucky to have our peer support worker and one of our facilitators here at Hope Learning Center, Melanie Tritz, spent a great deal of time composing this lengthy resource guide about how to protect yourself, how to figure out what the warning signs of scams are, and what are some of the resources to empower us and the people we care about so that we can be prepared in the event that there is a scam around.
Yeah, all hats off to Melanie. She's gone very in depth with a lot of the information that's in here. And Melanie, I know you're listening in here. We might hear from her in a little bit as the episode goes on. But yeah, awesome work on putting all this together. Carmen, why don't we start off with just kind of like some of the common scams that are out there? What are kind of the most prevalent form of scams that a lot of the population is kind of dealing with on a regular basis?
Well, there's a lot of different kinds of scams, but the common component about the scams is that oftentimes they are phishing. So not the pleasant kind of phishing that you go out to the lake, the phishing spelt with PH at the beginning, where they are looking for personal information. They are looking for banking information so that they can access your accounts. They might also be trying to fish out of you maybe some information regarding your social security number, things like that, right? Also things where you might encounter perhaps fake online marketplaces. So for instance, you might see on Facebook an item that seems such a ridiculously low price, right? But then when you go to try and meet the person, or they're asking for money up front, right? So things are not what they appear. You might see impersonation of government or trusted organizations like the banks. Again, you see in emails or texts in particular where they want you to try and click on a link in the case where they say, hey, you have an unpaid fine. You have something that needs to be taken care of so that you can get your tax refund. And then they have a link that you're supposed to click on, but it's in a text, right? There might also be social media fraud. So things like, I do see, and we were talking about this before the lunch bite began, for instance, Facebook, where there's please forward and share, there is a missing person, or please like and share, but they are actually trying to access your information, even your identity. And then sometimes you get common requests from people friend requests from people who are already attached to your profile, right? There are going to be other scams that are popularized, like, for instance, the grandparent scam, where suddenly you get a phone call from a long lost relative, from a grandchild. They need help being bailed out, or else someone who you find on social media, again, that might be attached to a romance scam, where it's someone who is just too good to be true and they just want true love, and you might be that person, right? So all of them, the common element is they capitalize on hope and desperation, and there are different vulnerability factors that might make certain people more vulnerable to scams.
Yeah, and I mean, when we're trying to kind of discern like what is a real request, what is more likely to be a scam, I guess kind of what are some of those warning signs? Like what are those red flags that just we should always kind of keep in mind when we start seeing I know for myself, I often get the text message scams. I've got a parcel that needs payment. I have something that stopped at the border. I have the government is coming to arrest me if I don't pay this fine immediately. I mean, those are some that, I mean, to me, stand out as just kind of like, well, I feel like I would probably get a letter in the mail if this was really something that was needing my attention. So just what are some of the other warning signs that we can kind of keep in mind when we're seeing things that maybe, like you say, kind of seem a little too good to be true at times?
Well, and that phrase alone is one of the things you need to really focus on. If it's too good to be true, it usually is. So for instance, pressure tactics is one thing. So with two different population groups, with seniors, for instance, they might be more vulnerable to telephone scams, where they are trying to prey upon the need for reciprocity, the need for relationships. Younger population groups, they are more likely to be prone to text scams, phishing scams about jobs, about marketplace. And it's about that desperation or need or scarcity that might be prone with younger age groups. But for sure, unsolicited contact. So if they contact you out of the blue and it's unexpected phone calls, emails, messages asking for your personal information. So as you mentioned before, Canada Revenue Agency is not going to be calling you on a Saturday morning or sending you a text for you to verify your personal information. Like you said, you're going to get it in the mail. It is an official document, right? Likewise, your banks aren't going to be texting you out of the blue for you to verify your information or to press on a link, right? Mm-hmm. Pressure tactics. And this is very common across the board. So whether it's a romance scam or a job scam where, say, you are getting a text out of the blue and they're saying, hey, I've got time to talk about this position. Are you free? And then it slowly escalates either way, where they build your trust and then all of a sudden, oh, I need you to transfer me money. I need you to send this. Let's switch over to WhatsApp to discuss this further, right? So if it's a job scam, they might be, for instance, asking you, saying, oh, there's complications setting up the payment profile. It looks like they've sent you too much money. Can you transfer this up or can you set up this account, right? And definitely a potential employer is not going to be asking you to set up new accounts. They're not going to be looking for payments in cryptocurrency or gift cards, that sort of thing. So those are definitely red flags to look for. Likewise, requests, again, for unusual payment methods. So, all of a sudden, someone that's tried to gain trust with you, they want you to send gift cards, go and buy them in bulk, wire transfers, cryptocurrency. And above all else, anything that's too good to be true. Mm-hmm. And like I mentioned before, certain people who are vulnerable to it, it's that whole too good to be true. And they like to capitalize, scammers like to capitalize on hope, on people's good nature, that they are going to trust them. And they are very trained on being expert manipulators. So that's why we're here today.
Absolutely. And maybe just a couple ones that I just want to add in there, just because, it's common things that I see, especially for emails, because you can often get some very convincing templates from some of these non-reputable sources. One of the things that I know I often do is check what's the actual email address that's being sent from. If this is an actual government email that I'm receiving, what's the @ call sign afterwards, right? Is it at gov.ca? That's your standard, government email address. If it's, .gov.gmail.ca.com, right? There's pretty clear indications that like that's not how an official document would be sent. Having a bunch of different numbers come up in there. One just through Facebook that often comes up, especially, anyone that's got a business page or any page that they operate, probably often get the your page is about to be taken down. You've got copyright infringements. You can look at who is sending that. Often the name changes every time. Often the link that's included in there changes every time. And there are subtle differences, but trying to pay attention to some of those details of like what is the actual source where this is coming from as well can be pretty. It can tell quite a lot of the story. Because you're not going to see mixed numbers, you're not going to see multiple different links for the same request coming out, and those are some of the main ones that just come to my mind often when
absolutely. And sometimes you'll see like misspellings. And if it's
Right.
something being sent out from the government of Canada and then the link is misspelt, you know,
Mhm.
for Canada or for Saskatchewan, right?
Right.
Things like that. Or else, like you said, I've actually encountered a recent scam just in helping someone apply for a job. Even on
Right.
the job bank, they would have several job profiles that were, mirrored, that looked exactly the same. But then you look at the contact info and it's a Hotmail address,
Mhm.
right? Or else it doesn't look like a legit, for a company that is very well known. It doesn't look like their email address. So yeah,
Mhm.
all of those are very important details to think about.
Yeah, if something just doesn't quite feel right about that source, it should send off a little bit of a red flag. We've got in the comments, I get emails supposedly from SaskTel with Gmail addresses. And yeah, that's exactly right. You're going to get
Mhm.
an official at sastel.ca or whatever it is, and anything other. Another one that I've sometimes seen, even when the email addresses are very accurate, is, let's say you do end up looking into the link and it's a PDF. It's a PDF with like a button, where like the text on that page isn't even text. It's just an image that they placed a button over, and as soon as you click
Mhm.
it, God knows what happens, but nothing good usually. Um, all right, that's a few kind of just things to pay attention to. What about, we've mentioned it a couple times, but vulnerable populations. So when we're talking vulnerable populations and kind of, you briefly mentioned that, older folks tend to be a little bit more targeted with phone solicitations and stuff like that. I guess just kind of what does that population distribution look like for who's at risk and kind of what is more of the risk for that population?
Well, obviously, there are certain populations that scammers are trying to target, but people who tend to be the most vulnerable are seniors, newcomers to Canada, people who are facing financial difficulty, and I'd also add people who may be vulnerable, or they may be vulnerable because of loneliness or isolation for reasons like recent bereavement, right? People
Mm,
who are grieving, people who have had a recent loss of a job, things like that. And that added stress component can make people, not as willing to trust their gut instincts all the time. Or perhaps they might be desperate, right, for additional help because of financial insecurity. So it's important to really think about that, because it's important for us to know who around us might be vulnerable as well as ourselves.
just so everyone's aware, Melanie is on the
Hi.
call. I've spotlighted her as well. As mentioned, she helped put together the vast majority of the information that we're kind of talking about for today. So Melanie, by all means, for any of the questions that we're talking about here, just chime in wherever you kind of feel
Thank
you'd like.
you. Yeah, and thank you for your kind words. As I was on my way home from my other job, I was listening in, and a couple of things jumped out to me,
Sure.
and that is that there's a scam called a pig butchering scam. And so in my research, I was watching a lot of like YouTube documentaries and movies and videos and doing a lot of reading. And I guess during the pandemic, what happened is a lot of these casinos in Asia, China specifically, were recruiting employees to work at these online casinos. And these individuals ended up being held captive and having their passports taken away from them. And these are like highly educated, technically smart, multilingual individuals who are brought into this situation because they were looking for work. And then, so if you've ever received a text that says, "Oh, hi, Sarah or Steve or something," and you go, "Oh, that's not my name. You must have the wrong number." They'll say, "Oh, I'm so-and-so. It sounds like we have something in common." And then they'll strike up a conversation and then end up making it seem like, "Oh, this has been like a fateful, random And so many people get these texts. So it's really just the quantity of messages that they're sending out. And then eventually somebody is going to want to talk because, like Carmen was saying, they might be lonely. They might be feeling isolated. They might need just someone to talk to. And I guess in 2020, this was often something a lot of us were going through. I think if you are interested in learning more, just typing like pig butchering scam into YouTube can give you a wealth of information just to see how big it is. And then there's the other one. I don't know if you have I guess if you have a Facebook account, you would be here at the podcast. If you've ever noticed that you have all these good-looking doctors and engineers who work overseas adding you as a friend and saying, oh, you're so beautiful, I'd love to talk to you, and God bless, or something like that. And then that's also like the intro into a romance scam. So if you find all of these like doctors who volunteer in third world countries, who are traveling right now, are interested in you, and they'll go on Facebook dating or dating apps, or I don't know if you've heard of the movie The Tinder Swindler. That's on Netflix. That's actually a really interesting example of a romance scam. So there's a lot of cool information that's available out there. But what surprised me the most is actually what is a pretty common right at home in Saskatchewan. And that's agricultural scams. So whether it's for, like Carmen was saying, the fake marketplace ads, so that could be for vehicles, farm equipment, tools, any kind of expensive machinery type item. And like Carmen said, the story will often be, I'm not in town. Can I send you an e-transfer to hold on to it? And then you'll receive an e-transfer. It'll say from a business, so auto deposit doesn't work, which is actually not true. Businesses have regular e-transfers like everybody else. And as soon as you click on that link and enter your info, then your information is compromised. And then there's also like crop insurance or leasing scams. So really targeted to the agricultural sector. And you'll notice an uptick in these types of things when there's like drought or excess rain or tornadoes or hail or just major weather, because there's that vulnerability. So I found it really surprising. And then
yeah, and I actually loved how you mentioned that it doesn't matter your education level. There's lots of people who do fall victim to scams, and they are just like all of us, right? And for some of them, there's just one thing that's missing, right? Whether it's a good job, whether it is a relationship, right? They've got everything else figured out, but there's just one thing that they haven't quite figured out. And scammers definitely have found very complex methods for trying to tap into that. So I really appreciate you mentioning that, because everyone can fall victim, depending on, how some of the information, how we're willing to question it.
For sure. And as you were mentioning, like for job scams, opening bank accounts and things like that. So as I mentioned about, the folks in China looking for work and then getting sucked into this sort of becoming fraudster situation. Oftentimes victims of fraud can end up becoming complicit in the fraud that they were originally targeted with.
And why is that?
And then used and not even realizing that they are complicit in the fraud as well.
Right. So. I guess, kind of talking to all these, we've talked a few of like the warning signs and stuff like that, but obviously some scams that we're going to encounter can look and seem very, very real. So what are kind of some fallback methods that we can rely on when we're trying to discern, what is real and what is something that is should definitely have a lot of red flags flaring up? and maybe the first one, just because it's something that I often run into with things that come up, is just verifying, like a simple verification, right? If the CRA is contacting me about something related to my tax return or something to that effect, well, I have two options. I can directly call the CRA. Right. If I'm not particularly internet savvy, I still have the ability to call and wait however long to actually talk to someone from the CRA to confirm, like, is this, do I actually have a note on my account or anything like that? Or, obviously you can go onto the actual website and check that way. So I think just like double verifying what it is that is being requested is something that's like vital in a lot of that sense, because there are going to be things that look convincing, and they are going to change depending on kind of what the request is. But I would say, aside from maybe like some of the marketplace scams, there should be a pretty easy way to have a second verification of what it is. Like, do I actually have a mark on my bank account? Is there any notes? Do I have any emails from my bank saying this that are in addition to this text message that I've gotten? Carmen, I know that one that you had mentioned was just unsolicited services. So I've gotten a job offer, but I never applied for any jobs. I'm
Yes.
not on Indeed. I didn't search out any sort of opportunity like this. Why would I be contacted by, a recruiter? So are there a couple other examples of just ways that we can kind of just kind of look at this with like a critical lens and kind of have some just some tools to kind of back check things when they
Well,
come
thanks. Yeah, actually, so we had mentioned before that be willing to end a phone call or not respond. Don't even click on links in your text messages. Like I would say just across the board, just don't click on them. Be willing to check the actual email addresses or the website URLs and contact them yourself separately. Same with if you did receive a grandparent scam phone call, ask for what precinct, what branch, what RCMP they're at. Look up the branch and call them yourself, or call the grandchild or the loved one who's calling you asking for help. Chances are it's not going to be the same phone number, right? It might even show up as private caller, right? Always look up official apps or addresses to be able to look up the real links to contact, right? So we had mentioned, if it's got a misspelling in the website or the URL, that's a major red flag, right? And like Dan said, especially where it comes to our banking information, if you use mobile apps for your banking, sign yourself up for two-step verification, right? So you will, if there's a large transaction that takes place in your account, you are able to get an email saying, hey, this seems out of character for you. Did you actually do this? Or else before you're able to sign a document, for instance, on your banking, you have to do two-step verification to prove that it's you. Another thing you can do is sign up for fraud alert. This is another thing that you can flag your accounts with in case any large transactions show up that just don't seem like for you, So if you use your card in other places and are worried if your card has been skimmed, that's a really good thing to look at. I'm curious about Melanie, what other things would you suggest as kind of protective layers for yourself?
So I definitely like what you're saying about verification. So whether it's the claiming to be the RCMP or the CRA or your grandchild or a relative or someone verification is so important. If it's the police, they're not going to call you and tell you that they're going to come and arrest you. If the police are truly going to come and arrest you, they will catch you by surprise. They will not warn you and let you know ahead of time and then demand money. The bail system in Canada is different and from the US, and like you couldn't like bail somebody out with cash.
Right.
for example.
Mhm.
Or maybe you could, but I've never heard of that. I've never seen that. Another thing too is that if you are starting to date someone new or entering into some kind of relationship, there could be situations like maybe the individual being scammed is already in a relationship and they're lonely. And then the person that they're talking to is making threats like, oh, I'll tell your wife, I'll tell your family, I'll, send me this. Oftentimes that's actually extortion. That's illegal. That's fraud. That's a major crime. And so it's really important to be aware that entering into a vulnerable situation can put a person at risk. Or they might receive an email saying, I saw you looking at so and so on your computer. I know what you did. Send so many Bitcoin to this address. And again, those are emails that just go out en masse. And then, maybe one person with a guilty conscience is going to say, oh my goodness, I'm worried now. So
Right.
Well,
Yeah,
and actually,
that's
I
a
think
that's a
that
good
it's good
point
to ask two major questions of yourself if you're worried that you're being taken advantage of by a scammer. And I would like to say this in general, across the board, regardless of the reason that they're asking for money in particular, questions to ask yourself. First of all, do you really know who you are sending money to?
Mm-hmm.
Second of all, have you met them in person? If either of those questions you answer with no, I would definitely hesitate to send any money to them. Because, like we said before, genuine employers are not looking for you to send them money. CRA is not looking for you to do things over text or email, right? And other official agencies likewise. People
Yeah.
who genuinely care for you, that you're in a genuine relationship with, I don't think they'd be asking for you to be sending them wire transfers.
Yeah,
Right?
whether it's $100 so they can buy gas, so they can come and visit you for your first time ever romantic date, whether it's, oh my goodness, I'm in another country, I've lost my wallet, I don't have anything, the kidnappers have me, they're going to kill me if you don't send $5,000 or something like that. Those are all high pressure, make a snap decision right now, preying on fear. So if you truly do have a loved one who's in this situation, like hopefully not, but in that case, who would be the first person you call? It would be the police.
Yeah.
This, I mean, I know we're coming up kind of to time here, but this does kind of flow nicely into, we're talking a little bit of like personal reflection, but obviously when we initially had kind of this conversation about doing scams as a topic for Lunch Bite, the 6 degrees of separation that I think we all had was that every single one, like all three of us, knew of multiple people who had at one point or another fallen victim to a scam. So what could some advice be, if we have family or friends or someone that is telling us about this opportunity, they've met this person, they're obviously excited, they obviously feel like this is kind of serendipity, this is just fallen out of the sky to happen and it's great and everything. And that's a very difficult conversation to kind of break into with like, well, perhaps you should be approaching this with a little bit of extra caution. How do we have that conversation? What does that conversation kind of look and sound like so that we don't scare this person away? Obviously,
I've made that mistake. I
yeah.
like to be direct often, and I think in this case, being direct was not the right approach because it can come across as judgmental or negative or unsupportive, or I'm not happy for that person, which is not true at all. I think it's just a different knowledge base that we have.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that that's very important. And even in the resource that you prepared, Melanie, you bring forward 3 points to remember. First of all, it's not your fault that scammers are skilled manipulators. acknowledge your feelings, right? Because when we feel really vulnerable and alone, that sometimes makes it difficult to override the emotional brain and access the logic part of your brain. Second of all, we do, like you said, we want to make sure the person, whether it's us or someone else, they do not isolate themselves further because of shame or embarrassment. So it's important that whoever it is able to seek out support, right? And having an open conversation really helps with that. And that's what we're going to do in the second part of this series. And then above all else, we want to make sure that we provide different resources, and we do have them in this printed resource that you've so expertly prepared. Basically, the third step is take action. We want to prevent anyone else from falling victim to any of these scams. So you want to report this scam, and you want to secure your accounts as we've recommended.
Absolutely.
And I mean, one of the other things that I've used myself sometimes, because like I said, sometimes it's very difficult to tell what is real and what isn't. Sometimes the nature of the scam itself, you can type into Google and actually just see, is this a scam? I'm being contacted by the CRA for this. I have someone in another country that's asking for help to get out of a situation. Is this likely a scam? I know it kind of sounds a little too simple to do. And I mean, we've obviously got a bunch of other tips in this guidebook, but often scam, like we say, when scams are reported, they're reported in not just to the authorities. Often they show up in the internet as people that are trying to also like advise, like this is the type of scam, you know, are these components part of what you're dealing with? You're likely dealing with a scam. I know for like the Facebook ones, when I first started receiving them about like copyright infringements and page takedowns and stuff like that, I had to Google it. I was unsure if, you know, this was a real thing. And, you know, you'll see Google pages after pages talking, you know, help articles, Reddit articles, forum articles that outline very clearly kind of the same manipulative tactics that you may be experiencing or a family member may be experiencing. And, you know, just being able to also present that maybe to someone that is engaged with one of these kind of scams, just kind of showing like, I know this looks and sounds very convincing, and I wish with all of my heart that this was actually what you think it is, but like, here are multiple articles talking exactly about this scenario, and none of them were actually, you know, a real situation. And, you know, just being able to kind of bring some of that to light also might help just with that critical thinking piece. Because I think one thing that maybe we just didn't mention is like, if someone's dead set on sending money or convinced that this is like the love of their life, you know, you bringing up the topic that this might not be what they think it is, you know, like Melanie kind of said, you can go right in and maybe, you know, have a bit of a confrontation where they just choose not to listen. But, you know, if they're convinced, our role is kind of just to bring them information that says like, you might need to just reconsider this, take a step back and just kind of look at this with a little bit more of a critical lens, because ultimately you want that person to come to that realization. It's very rare that we're ever going to kind of convince anyone with any amount of research or information or you know, talking points that something that they really truly believe is real isn't. So, you know, being able to approach it from a couple different perspectives in that sense of maybe even being able to show like, I know this sounds great, but like, this is multiple internet articles that talk about exactly what you're going through. And we've got a bunch of stuff listed in this resource guide that also walks through a bunch of different websites that have you know, stuff that you can read out and see different types of scams and how they're structured. So just kind of want to mention that as well. That
yeah, I think that it's really what you bring up is an important point. Above all else, we want to maintain the relationship, because we could very well be the support person that they're going to have to lean on, right? So we want to make sure we don't burn bridges. We want to present them with information to empower themselves to make the right choice.
And sorry, Melanie, I didn't come back to you there quick enough.
No worries. I just had a quick thought. So you were talking about the copyright infringement emails.
Mhm.
So you and I just went through this. What
did.
I'm starting to notice, the pattern, is that I think what's happening is fraudsters are actually involving the actual company, whether it's Facebook or your bank, as a precursor to what's going to be a follow-up. So Hope Learning Center received an email saying you have your Lunch Bites podcast specifically has infringed copyright, and we own this material, and you are going to have your content removed. And I reviewed it, and I reviewed the video, and I thought, there's nothing here that's infringing anybody's copyright. And so I disputed it, and then the person accepted the dispute, meaning that they confirmed, okay, you're right. However, what I'm expecting to see soon is some emails saying Facebook says that you've done this that won't be from Facebook. Or I'm getting text messages and phone calls from the Bank of Montreal saying that I have to call them back, and it's the same number as my bank. But when you look it up on Reddit, it says that's actually a scam, because that's likely a precursor to another text that'll probably get in a couple of weeks that'll say, this is BMO, click on this link to deal with this situation because you haven't called us back, sort of thing. Because I was just in my bank yesterday. They said nothing about my account. There's no flags.
Yeah, and chances are the contact info on that profile says it was just created 5 days ago. And the email address is like a Hotmail or a Gmail.
Actually, no, it's the full, well, like the initial contact is the actual bank information. The initial contact was through Facebook, but later on, it's going to be the fake one. So,
well, thanks for bringing that up.
Yeah, just noticing a pattern and just sort of what we're experiencing, just even as an organization and a podcast. So,
yeah, I mean, it is. We've got one other comment just in our chat. It says I had a text asking me to give $50 to them, and they'll give me a $50 Starbucks card. Right? Any of that kind of preemptive, send me this so I can send you that. Definitely red flags with that. I know I've received a few from work where it's been supposedly come from the director here at CMHA saying, oh, we made this deal. I need you to run out and grab this, that, and the other thing, and send those out to this client. And there's no additional email information, no signature on the email. It's just kind of like, well, obviously this is not from who it's supposed to be. Yeah, anyway, I know we're at like 1 o'clock just about here. I feel I say this just about every episode. I feel like we could continue talking about this. And hey, for once, that's actually true, because we will be back next week for part 2. We're going to be talking a little bit more just kind of about like that intervention step, a little bit more of kind of like the fallout effects that can come from scams, and just kind of like that impact on people's mental health, on how they're feeling, as well as I feel like I'm missing some of the other talking points. Give me 2 seconds here. Part 2 is a little bit more on just loneliness, building resistance to some of the scam requests that come out. So there'll be a bunch more good information. And then in addition, we are also going to have in the show notes this scammers guide that we've created through the Hope Learning Center, all the hard work Melanie's done putting that together. We'll have that available for download for anyone that's interested in checking that out. And then we're also going to link that on the Hope Learning Center website as well. So tune in. We'll kind of carry on our conversation next week. And Melanie, Carmen, thank you guys both for joining me on today's episode. It's always nice. We got the 3 of us on here. For everyone watching today, thanks for joining in. For anyone on social media that has been watching today's episode, if you want to comment any kind of experience that you guys maybe have had, some preventative measures that you guys have taken, just help fill up the comments and kind of carry on the conversation. We'll check through those and maybe mention some in next week's episode as well. That'll be on September the 24th. Part 2. For anyone interested, we also have additional courses up for registration through the Hope Learning Center's website, skhope.learningcenter.ca. I believe today is session 1 of Building Better Boundaries. I'm not mistaken. Session 2. Never mind. That's not for registration. We do have other ones up on there, though. So definitely go check out skhope.learningcenter.ca. Got a bunch of other courses to register for, or you can always sign up with the Lunch Bites podcast and receive a weekly Zoom invite to come join in on our Zoom call. You can take questions and chat with us here. Otherwise, like, share, subscribe, and we'll see everyone next week. Melanie, Carmen, any last comments before we maybe sign off for the day?
Just be curious. Be willing to be curious and question. If you have that gut feeling that something isn't right, you're probably right.
Probably right. All right, perfect. Melanie, any last?
Trust your gut. If it feels funny, even just slightly, investigate. Whether it's Googling a phone number, searching someone's name, just use Google. Google's your friend in this case. And now that we have AI, ChatGPT, they can also give you lots of information on any question that you have. And you can always ask us. Feel free to reach out to us, and we will be happy to connect you with resources. We provide peer support. We can recommend courses. We're here for you.
Perfect. All right. Thanks, everyone. We'll see you next week for part 2. And until then, take care of yourself, be curious, and stay safe out there.
Thank you so much.